Welcome, everyone. This is Coaching in Session. My name is Michael Rearden, and I will be your Mindset Coach today. And today we're going to be talking about the aspect of our body and the science behind it. Because we have talked about the mind, we have talked about the concept of wellness, we have talked about how we can push ourselves, the alignment of us, getting our health back to where it needs to be. But have we looked at the science yet? And I have had doctors come on, talk about their work, specific issues with health, fitness, etc. But today we're going to take a deeper dive into the notes of who we are as a human, as we are as a being. It is linked to mindset. It is linked to you trying to live your best life. But yet, even if you know this information, it doesn't guarantee you're going to take action. Some people are just people who are hoping and wishing for something good to come their way, but yet they don't realize that they are the key component if they are going to make that a reality. Today is not only going to be the presentation of who you can become, the encouragement or encourager for you to say, you know what, I'm going to look into this. I'm going to take action. I'm not going to stay where I am. So if you're ready to get your best body, your best mind, and be in the best health of your life, you're not going to want to miss this episode with my guest, Daniel Tausan. Welcome, Daniel Tausan, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm quite excited to be here with you. Talk about mindset.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on also. We're going to be talking about your work. You are a personal research scientist and you help people with their bodies and their mind grow into their best health. And this is some of the most critical information that we need in our world today, because you probably heard of the word misinformation used before. And I can't tell you how much misinformation is going on with your health, your fitness, and it's just being touted as this is what you need to do if you want to see results. But there is a science to getting healthy mind, a healthy body. And yet many people are unaware of that. But today we're going to be talking about that. In your own words, can you tell the world who you are, what you do, and how you help?
My name's Daniel, and I've been interested in what the hell's going on planet Earth. You know, what are we doing here? I think as kids, we all have that question in us early on. And then somewhere along the lines, we get wrapped up and busy and forget that mystery about, what it means to be here. And I studied the cell. I figured out that we are multicellular beings. Somewhere around 70 trillion cells compose what we are. And it is a two-part in terms of health to understand really what's going on. One, there's the cellular aspect, and then the physiological correspondence. And so that's really where I come in. Help people remember that one, you have to take care of all the cells and how they cooperate in order for you to get you, which is that point of awareness that gets to experience life. If any aspect is a little bit out of alignment, it's going to take away from your ability to be able to focus, your ability to enjoy and have that blissful experience. It's a bit of the reassessing what people have taken on as beliefs. I think a term that's used quite often is limiting beliefs. But there can be beliefs that can quite get you to grow in a really wrong direction, right? There is a certain biology we must respect in order to have health, right? We don't get to do anything we like. But within certain contexts, we can offset for our, let's say, our vices or the things that, the sugars or the alcohol or the other kind of components, which we want to engage in. And so what does that look like? What does that mean? Where's our health going to end up? What's the trajectory going to be if we know how to use it respectfully or if we abuse it?
Well, let's begin to break down and get straight into the critical components, right? Let's separate it cellular and physical. What is that? Is it just like your anatomy, your genetics, or is it something that we are in control of? So maybe the first part is something that we're not in control of. Maybe we are. And the second part is maybe something we're in control of and maybe it's not. If you could, just kind of walk us through those two different sections.
Yeah, absolutely. So the you that's in control of it is a little bit of a trick in the language because there's a limitation in what you at the moment can control, but you can set your outcomes for the future. So though you can't control it instantly, you can make it so that if you do the proper things within a certain amount of time, you're going to get the outcomes that you want. So in a way, the control is a different one really context specific. But we have one genome. Every single cell in your body, even though we have 70 trillion, has the exact same genome. It's how the cell uses the genome that ends up making it a liver cell, pancreatic cell, intestinal cell, heart cell, lung cell, bone cell, blood vessel cell, perivascular cell, and the list goes on. And so there's about 200 cell types that comprise the body. And it is imperative that we understand that they don't all age the exact same rate because we all put ourselves in different contexts. We might be a miner, one might be a lumberjack, one might be in the kitchen, one might be in a factory, one in a steel mill. We're all in these different spots. And so we're going to acquire these different, call it burdens or challenges in which we have to navigate life's, what life throws at us. The way that all those cells work together ends up being that physiological function, the lung function, the liver function, the contracting your muscles, the bronchioles in your lungs from constricting and dilating. And so for health, one of the easiest and simple and most important factors for our health is how do we maintain the pressures within our different chambers, right? Cranium, the head, lungs, the pleural cavity, or the abdominal peritoneal cavities. Those are our three major chambers in which we maintain pressure. And so when the cell is working phenomenally, then it's easy to maintain those pressures, right? The heart, blood, that means blood's flowing in a very nice manner. When the cell is struggling, when we start sending it things in which suffocate the cell, I'll kind of fluff up the language a little bit there, but in an analogy, we can suffocate the cell so that it can't move gases easily across its membrane. It can't exchange with the blood very easily. And there's tons of things we do in order to put ourselves in those states. And if that happens, then the pressures in those chambers are going to get shifted. It's going to move, for example, pressure in the head, headaches, migraines, constant problems, trouble focusing. People say a fogginess comes in so they can't think clearly like they did previously. If it's within the chest, you're not going to be able to breathe. You're going to be very lethargic. You're not going to want to do anything. And the hardest thing then is to actually get you active so that the lungs can open. And the most common one is going to be pressure from the abdomen because we use how much we're eating, overconsumption of calories, and not enough nutrition. For anybody's health, if they're looking for that long con, well, they have to really have that cellular component down. They have to know how to keep the cell clean, the genome from out getting damaged, the proteomic component that surrounds the genome that has the function to keep you moving things across the membranes, pulling in oxygen, pulling in nutrients. And then the last part is not as imperative. It's that signaling. It's the actual molecules that you use for energy, the ones that are trafficked around. Those can be quite dynamic. And they're not as imperative as in some clinical contexts might suggest as what I've seen. I've seen individuals with blood panels in which you would think, oh, their kidneys are going to explode. But because they have such an extensive blood panel, you see that their kidneys are fine and that they're able to deal with a lot of stress and challenges. And often those ones are from very challenging individuals like military personnel, where they have blood work that's quite exceptional and not very easy to interpret. And so sometimes it finds it to my door to be like, okay, well, what's going on with this guy? Does he need to go underneath a knife or not? And so hopefully that kind of gives a general overview from the genome all the way to the cell to how those cells function together in order to give us the health that we want, that we come on this planet with the absolute machinery to have, but somewhere along the lines we stumble and mess it up.
Would you say that it is us that messes it up, or is it something that's an outside stimulus? For example, if you ever see a child who's overweight, is it the child's fault that they have been, fed foods that are not healthy for them, that are making them gain weight, or perhaps even going as far to say that they're not getting the proper education, that their body needs this good exercise, good food, good nutrients, because we can give them a Happy Meal from McDonald's and something like that, and like we can fill their bellies, but it doesn't mean that we're going to give them exactly what they need. You're not getting the fruits, the vegetables, the fiber. It's just being full. And I think about a story. This was in Africa a long time ago, where a mom, she didn't have any food to feed her children. And she would boil rocks. And they would just bowl rocks, and she would just tell the kids, like, okay, I got the food cooking, got the food cooking until they just fell asleep. And she would do her best to get food for them. But we can see that from that story, parents want to do the best for their kids, I believe. That mom wanted to, like, she had the inclination to make sure her kids could, have some food. In a sense, she was visualizing, want to get my kids some food. Me cooking the food is going to give me that mindset of I need to get food for my children so they don't go hungry. In a sense, we as adults now, millennials are probably like the leading authority in parents right now. Like they spend 71% more time with their children. You know what they do? And this is no fault of their own. They have a mindset that they say, I want to give my kid the life that I never had. That mom who was bowling rocks, her kids are going to say, I don't want to have to struggle with food and my kids anymore. If my kid is hungry, I'm going to make sure they eat. But it doesn't matter about the food now. It's just as long as they have food. You want McDonald's? Sure, I'll get it for you. You want Burger King? Sure, I'll get it for you. You want Chick-fil-A? You want Chipotle? You want pizza? I'll get it for you. So we are pushing off the blame now on our parents, say, so mom and dad couldn't do it. So I'm trying to elevate. But the way we elevate is almost of ignorance. We are not giving our children the best nutrients that they can have, even though they were given everything that they needed to be self-sufficient and to evolve into the best possible person they can be. And as you said, somewhere along the line, things go amok. Do you think it's the lack of education or is the lack of direction from the parent and maybe even of society as a whole?
That's a very good question. And then I think speaks to the magnitude of how much the social aspect of our lives really shapes our health. And I see that within the individuals that I work with, that their social context is the biggest predictor of their long-term health. So out of all the aspects, the sleep, the way that they have their social circle is by far the most important thing, whether I know that they'll be, in a higher risk of a stroke or heart attack, or whether they're going to be quite okay to be taken care of. And we can think of a very silly but simple example. You have a brother, and that brother is, very much so into taking care of his little brother. So little bro's like, oh, let's go get some McDonald's, and then big bro won't let him. He's like, nah, man, we're not gonna eat that stuff. Let's go home. I'll make some beans. I'll do something simple. Let's get some real food in us, because big bro knows. The young kid has now got his life set, right? The most important years of your life is those years where you're developing, you're manifesting your structure, you're deciding how your stem cells are going to be shaped for the rest of your life, right? As an adult, you have adult stem cells in different compartments of your body. I was lucky to have a really good brother. And what he did was he really put an emphasis on the physical and mental prowess at a young age. So at age 14, I started lifting weights. And there was this, there's still a stigma to this day, but I don't hear it as much because I'm in different circles of, oh, if you lift weights at a young age, it's going to stunt your growth. I'm the tallest in my family by far. If anything, the science would actually suggest otherwise, where as your long bones grow, they have a thing called an epiphyseal plate, which is this growing piece of cartilage that solidifies into bone. And if you actually stress it, if you put a little tension, acute loading across it, it actually gets it to grow bigger. That social context on a bigger scale is absolutely what I mean by we mess it up along the way. Marketing looks like science. It's not science. It's like Halloween. It's dressed up as science. And it's trying to tell you, oh, this is healthy, this is not. And that's something to be very careful of, is the fashion in science and the way it's presented. And I see this as possibly a massive failure from the educational system, or from people's, I would say, interest along the way while they're getting educated, to really pick up the basics of science. And most people I talk to that have absolutely no education have the most intuitive answer for it. So let me throw it your way, Michael, there. What does science mean to you?
Science is the study of things or concepts that they can prove or disprove. And it could be the science of medicine. It could be the science of how someone works out, how the body moves. So there's a systematic approach to it. However, today, science means whatever I tell you. It's kind of backwards from understanding, like we live in a fact-based world, but like many people, they live in this delusion where they think that I can eat McDonald's 5 days out of the week. And if I have a salad one day, I'll be okay, right? I'm doing what I'm supposed to, right? I'm eating my greens, but they're not seeing how much harm is being caused. So science has been fluffed up and watered down recently. So it has been something where we have evolved, and it's a technology in a sense where we get better. Think of our lifespan. It was going up and up and up, and now all of a sudden it's going down. I'm not sure where the science is in that, but that's the reality. There is the social context that we have to look at too when we're trying to move in a direction toward better health. And there's a famous saying, they say, if you show me your friends, I'll show you your future. And that is so true, because we can look at what's happening in the world right now, and high levels of obesity, high levels of depression and anxiety. The science should be able to show you, hey, if this is happening, what is the fix? How do we fix it? Yet, it's almost like we know the science, we know the answer, but yet we don't stop. It's like you are in a car and you're going 100 miles an hour and you see a wall on the road and you just say, okay, I'm going to go faster. I'm going to make it through the wall. You're not going to make it through the wall. You're going to crash. And that is what science is today. We are going so fast. Everything is going so fast that people are not paying attention to the obstacle that's right in front of them. And often that is themselves.
I'll narrow in on one word specifically you said, is the systematic approach. And that is exactly what science is supposed to be, a enterprise in which whatever you're interested in is going to get built out into a knowledge base systematically, so that you can come back to it and have confidence, not that it's proven to be right, but that it's sufficient to explain however far you've managed to do the work. And what I mean by that is that science never tells you definitively something is yes or no. I mean, the yes and no's are obvious. The sun rises. Okay, you got to move past that. It provides a provisional explanation, right? A temporary explanation for the moment. And this is the idea of science is constantly built upon. If you have quality science, and this is where I kind of run into a little bit of philosophical conundrum of, if something pretends to be science, but it isn't, or it looks like it, but it doesn't really have any scientific merit in it, is it still science? Do we say that's poor science? Do we say that's not science at all? And is this a lack of our ability to be able to discern what is and what isn't science? And so it's very simple how I've broken it down in terms of helping people have call it a framework to navigate belief structures. And it's very simple. First is you have to have an observation that you can talk about. And this is also, if you're ever with a healthcare professional or any kind of professional, this is the easiest way to ask the questions, because the questions, they don't really change across the fields. It's just the techniques do, the specifics do. But it's, what are you observing? Okay. And when you observe it, you must take the world and transform it into a world of symbols. You're doing a process called characterization. You're making characters so that after we pass, we can leave that information in terms of a text or some kind of iconography for next individuals. And they can pick up and they would still get the same ballpark of where we left for them. You get a knowledge base from having proper observations. So this is the first way to ask questions. Well, how do you know what you know? What are you observing? How are you characterizing it? In that sense, you need a detection system. So for the human being, we're a very complicated detection system, but we can make it simpler where you use a photo tube to detect light, or you use, a speedometer to detect speed, right? So you're using technology in order to be able to do this process of detecting something that is a stimulus or some kind of event. So that's the first and most important aspect of science. And it can stop there. You interested in the mushrooms that are growing in your forest, the mosses or the ferns? That's it. You're going to go observe it. You're going to characterize it. You're going to put it down, and you're done. There isn't the next step. The next step is the tedious step that everyone wants done, but no one really wants to do it, is the measurements. You need measurements. You need controls. If you don't have a control, your measurements are useless. Like, hey, you're positive for a virus. Here's your blood test. Hey, if you don't have a control value, it's just noise. You really have no predictive value from that measurement. And this is the biggest part of science. When you become very successful scientists, what's funny is you have other people do the science and you just look at the graphs they make, and then all of a sudden you're confident in it. But if you're the guy who's producing the graph, oh man, there's all this tension and anxiety of, hey, did you count the right, did you set it perfectly? If you're counting cells under a microscope, was your slide too thick? Did you look in the right spot? Was it a fair comparison? Whereas everyone else is just happy that the work has been done and they have something to go off of. And so that's the second part of science, is you have to have some type of measurements. That's the easiest thing to ask a professional. It's like, well, how are you going to measure this? Where are you going to compare it to? Are you comparing me to me? Or are you comparing me to somebody else? Or are you comparing me to an 80-year-old that has Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, right? Like, who are we comparing to? And you have to be very careful. And as they say in different, scientific circles, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. You can't compare opposite fruits. And so in the last aspect, so that's pretty much the massive part of science. Observe, measure, and then you have to make a guess. And it's okay to be wrong, but you have to have some type of predictive value from what you're doing. That's sort of the goal to science, if there is one. There's this enterprising, systematic approach to be able to have information so people can rely on, hey, I have something to access and I can build off of this. I can innovate. And that guess, for example, 100 years ago, people drew lactic acid from the blood and they guessed, oh, hey, this could be making people sore. That was wrong. It's hydrocarbons in different aspects and muscle tears that cause the soreness. Lactic acid doesn't. We figured that out years later. But the science still sits from 100 years ago. The science is the concentration value of lactic acid they pulled. Where did they pull it from? The leg. What was the demographic? How old was the demographic? That's all that's the science there that helps us navigate today's challenges. We can compare our lactic acid values to men from 100 years ago. That's pretty useful. There might not be no changes, but hey, that's something else we know. We know there's no changes in lactic acid from very fit individuals. This is something so basic. And sometimes when individuals have distanced themselves from, I would say, the mainstream conversations, their, call it intuition, works phenomenally. And their intuition and science go hand in hand. What they know, what they act on, what they speak in this intuitive process of what we do in order to be able to demystify the world for ourselves. The world's full of magic. And then once it's not magic anymore, it's science. To me, this has been a kind of an alarming aspect because I have really successful, smart individuals get caught with some very basic mental tropes where their mindset has shifted towards something in which is what I'd say an insoluble problem. It doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to solve this problem. And another way to say it is a vicious circle they get stuck in. This is a big part of what I've also enjoyed doing is this detective work of, okay, someone has, let's say, a disease. Now, this is my personal belief. I speculate on this, is that if someone has acquired a disease throughout their life that ultimately has some basis in a belief that has led them astray. And if we can figure out what that belief is, we can find the course for regeneration, for healing. And there's certain principles for regeneration that work regardless of whether we fully iron out what got them into that problem. But sometimes it's pretty easy to figure out what got them there. I have this almost eerie feeling that diseases or the problems of today, they have some context, whether it's a lot harder for scientifically delve into, for example, at the emotional basis. That's one part where I've been quite working as to up my game, is to understand the emotions that people are either not able to move through their body and how that might account for what's going on in them, right? Arthritis or Crohn's or, sleeping disorders, insomnias. What is it that an emotional state, which is sitting in their body, that's causing havoc? For some people, they'd be like, oh, emotions and stuff, that's, no way. But I think it's very easy to get into this page of understanding that it's a very real physiology, very real biology, because take a look at someone who's in a fear state. Take a look at their blood. Can you measure something that's going to be in their blood when someone's in a fear state? Absolutely. All right. We have, the easy one, cortisol, corticotropin. You got a stress hormone response. And an interesting thing is that part of that stress response when someone's in a fear state, and a chronic fear state is very detrimental for your health. Having a fear, no problem. As long as that fear does your life, you move on, you recognize it, it's an emotion that passes. But when it's in a chronic state, you can see how the blood changes. Well, how's that work for the other emotions then? Can other emotions also cause similar problems? If fear is the smoking gun, the easy one, these other emotions are, I think, key to also helping unravel aspects of an individual's health. Something I'm interested in, but obviously I don't have a handbook or a clear guide. It's something that I simply call it play with like a tennis match with whoever's with me to try and figure out what it is, right? Kind of open the floor, open the dialogue, no judgment, or let's say judgment, but no animosity, no hate, only for the idea that we're trying to move something in terms of building you to a person where you're able to experience bliss, right? Getting you back to the bliss factory that we all can be.
There's a mindset now that might come up where if we can see the levels in our blood, like the cortisol rising or, fear, if we know that our body can fluctuate in that regard, and we control our body in that regard. So, for example, instead of me using that fear to stand still, I can use that fear as momentum. We can look at some of the most trained individuals in the world, Navy SEALs, for an example. When they are about to bust down a door, right? The adrenaline is kicking, right? Fear is there, of course. But they have learned methods to utilize that fear, that momentum, that adrenaline, and use it to enhance themselves. So now they're able to operate at a higher efficiency than they would just going to the grocery store. Do you see that people can control these things with training, or is it something that it depends on the individual and their background?
I think most people can train it. That's the beautiful thing, Asma. It's just a matter of desire, volition, intention. How bad do they really want it? I think most people don't want to be a Navy SEAL, but even for the regular individual, the biggest way to control the mind is to control the breath. And once something has come to a point of awareness, that's almost like that, what they have for the alcoholics, AA. The first step is admittance or acceptance, or to acknowledge that you have an issue. The same comes with any of these physiological responses. The first point is to have awareness that it's happening to you. Once you come to that point, it's up to the individual how to find the strategy that's going to work for them to be able to shift it, because we have different ways of soothing the soul. And in a very simple sense, maybe for some individuals they act like call it like a negative style where they want to pull something towards themselves, while someone else positive style, they want things to go outwards. And so if it's something like, let's say, a stress response to work scenario, or let's take the Navy SEALs one as an example. I think for the vast majority of them, they have an acceptance that they might die. And you say, okay, it might happen. That's fine. I'm not going to dwell on it. Move forward. And that acceptance is key then, not to have that physiological response anymore, right? You let go of the fear of death. And now on a very much more practical scale for, let's say, the office workers or for individual teachers and the bus drivers. Okay, similar sense. What is it that's causing a problem? Is it an issue, let's say, with a certain individual? Okay, well, then there needs to be some type of way to be able to find peace with if that person is causing you problems, or whether you want something out of that person, to come to acknowledge that which strategy is going to work so that it's going to become amicable. But those social bonds can be quite challenging. And this is where it's something in which the counselors end up coming to be able to help soothe what people are causing their own problems. And so one of the very common one is, I want you to want something. I'm going to be in a perpetual state of problems in my physiology, because this is something that's never going to work out. I can't control you to a point where I dictate your choices, your behaviors. That's just not how. It's an aspect to learn in life of what you have, let's say, control over. And even something like your mind, it's important to learn to place a sentinel in areas that are very important to you. So we're talking about how you can control the physiology. If I say, hey, don't think of an elephant, the moment I say the word elephant, it's pretty hard for you to not think of an elephant. If I talk about a trunk, if I say gray elephant, I think of an elephant in Africa, I think of an elephant in India, I think about a guy riding an elephant. How did you protect your mind from not seeing that image? It's really difficult. But now consider the context of somewhere else where, let's say, someone's bugging you, someone's agitating you. Let's say in a sports setting, someone's trying to psych you out. This is part of sport where people try to get in your skin and try to break your confidence. What sentinel do you place in order to be able to, once all this noise comes into the head, it doesn't manifest or take hold in there? And so these are simple strategies in which people can employ in order to be able to start figuring out what physiology is at play for them. And the thing is that not all of us will experience the same emotions, right? And with my sporting days, people can say whatever they wanted to. I was daydreaming about winning. My worst enemy was myself. If I missed a shot, I would eat myself up. And so I would take very high percentage shots and feel very good about 3 shots in a game, but 2 goals. I played water polo. And, I had other parts where I took great, just say, joy in doing. I liked the physical aspect of it. I like getting my hands on somebody else. I knew if I was able to grab the other guy, I would be successful. If he was very quick, squirmy, and didn't let me grab him, I started feeling the pressure. Like I have to now stay even more, let's say, activated, elevated, tense and ready. The part I think that becomes the easiest, very simple aspect to today's, let's say, very practical solution or advice is the mind is king of the body. If you perceive a snake when there's just a rope on the ground, you might get very scared. If you're not scared of snakes, you might get excited. But the mind is king of the body. It will dictate what's happening. Now, what controls the mind is the breath. So this is the most practical and simple practice to take on to help control mindset, to help shift mindset, help grow your mindset into the direction where you would like. And all the elite individuals on the planet that I have met have a breathing technique that they rely on. We talk about jet plane fighters, they have a breathing technique. I personally have never met one, but I'll be excited the day I do if they ever come to my door. I've met a lot of deep sea divers, free divers too, and they have a breathing technique they do before they go in. The cold exposure group, I myself, I do that. We have a breathing technique. You have a breathing technique to prep the physiology so that your blood is buffered and that heat is being generated by your diaphragm and your intercostals, your muscles around your ribs. And so you're already heating up as you're even stepping into this cold water. And when you're in there, it isn't as big of a shock. Women in pregnancy, they have a breathing technique for that. These different breathing techniques are there not by accident, but because this is the best, strongest way, most impactful way to control your physiology. And it's a little bit under talked. It's not talked about. It's not even taught in the classrooms. And even from over a decade of schooling that I took, it's talked about in its very general sense about the gases in the body. You can easily overlook it, but the importance is astronomical. There's a reason why the brainstem is tucked so far away from all the other possible harms, and it's a very protected structure because it's controlling the pressures and the gases in the entire body. And we mentioned at the beginning the cell aspect of how we can suffocate the cell. Well, there's three gases that really dictate the human physiology. I think one is obvious, is the oxygen. The second one, carbon dioxide, we produce it. And we don't breathe in oxygen and just breathe out the same molecule of oxygen out with just a carbon attached to it. Instead, that oxygen becomes water and our fat, our sugar doesn't technically burn, we strip the molecules. And we then exchange that and we produce carbon dioxide. Now, producing carbon dioxide is extremely beneficial. It is key to making that, call it suffocation in the cell, not happen. So as we engage in exercise, as we do these breathing techniques, what we actually do is we bring up the level of carbon dioxide within the cell. And this is extremely beneficial because it almost acts like a little gas can that sprays really high pressure gas to clean up, let's say the stove or really hard to reach places, small electronics. It's this pressure of carbon dioxide that helps bump out the third gas that can be quite problematic, which is nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is not intended to be a vasodilator. But in today's context of our lifestyles, what we see is that it is very prevalent and very easy to release. Now, nitric oxide is supposed to activate the immune system. It's supposed to make it so that when there is an invasion, let's say a massive cut, and now there's microbes that have entered, broken through the barrier, nitric oxide controls immune cells. But if it's chronically being released because of metabolic problems, now metabolic problems come from very simply what we eat, when we eat. Did we eat right before bed? That's going to start suffocating that cell. And nitric oxide is going to be released. It's going to go to the part where the cell where we like to breathe. And this is where that carbon dioxide plays a role where it bumps out the nitric oxide. So those are the three gases that really dictate, the human physiology. And we can go incredibly deep into their impacts in different aspects of health. But just bringing it to the back of why breathing, why that very simple aspect of coming to a point of finding some breathing exercise that you're going to participate in, whether it's, hey, this is necessary in order for me to survive deep sea or jet plane. I think a few of us will ever experience that. But very simply, it's like, hey, this is here to help control one, my stress response, two, so that I can finally relax, which is something that we don't do well today's age. We think we do, but our rest and digest part of our nervous system, our parasympathetic nervous system, doesn't activate often. And because it doesn't, it actually keeps us in a state in which pushes us more towards problems with our health. And this is where I kind of alluded to, like, we're in a world where we have so much, we have difficulty even having that sensation, that feedback from what our body's telling us, and knowing how to be able to engage in it. And so the refrigerator is, a big culprit. How easy it is to get access to food. Technology today is another one in which I myself find it a challenge to put it down, to not be engaged constantly. And that all plays a role into how active that part of the nervous system is, which then is going to play a role into the way the body uses the gases, which is going to drive the metabolic conditions. And there is no greater effect that you can take for your health and physiology than to pick up some type of breathing routine, breathing exercise, where you treat it like, instead of going to the gym and pumping iron, instead of going to the tracks to run or treadmill or cycling, taking breathing on as an exercise will give you the most bang for your buck, right? You're not going to have gigantic muscles. You might not have that security in terms of muscular endurance later on in life. But because you have built out this practice of breathing, the cellular component will be taken care of. And if the cellular program is taken care of, you can push it to 90 pretty well, even though, let's say, you might not be so nimble, you won't be able to do backflips or handstands. You'll be there at 90 and you'll be cognitively present. That's just one of the simple ones in which, can help control the physiology. But I think it all starts there. It all starts with that body-mind connection, and the breath helps engage that body-mind connection.
And I do have to say that this has been extremely informational for the listeners, the audience, because, they know the things that are touted, because, people who are listening to the podcast are definitely into personal development, self-help. So they probably have heard these things, but now to have what's happening in the body, what's happening in the mind, what they can do about it, the terms, all of these things are going to just give it a like another piece to the puzzles that they can incorporate, or they don't have to incorporate it, but it just enhances the immersion. Because how deep do you want to go? Some people don't want to go so deep. Some people want to stay in surface level. Some people want to be told what to do. I have clients say, Michael, just tell me what to do. I go, no, I'm not doing that. We just need to see what you need to do. Okay. Because we're not looking at what is going to give me a feeling of they're making progress, I'm happy for them, but then you're miserable because you're not living the life that's true to you. What works for you, right? And as you were saying, right, like maybe you're not competitive. Maybe you don't want to be a Navy SEAL. Maybe you don't want to exercise, right? But it all is going to go back to the foundation. Whether you don't want to do it or you want to do it, you're going to breathe. Understanding that, the power behind it, getting your mind in tune is going to maybe be a great place to begin. And, listening to the episode again and just learning all the nuances of what's going on in your body and how we can be deceived in a sense that if we're trying to enhance ourselves, it's not a fad thing that we need to be looking at. Oh, we need to do keto. Oh, we need to do paleo. Oh, we need to do P90X. Yes, those can be beneficial, but I've seen it fail more than it succeed. And the common factor for someone succeeding and them failing is if they want it. And you have to ask yourself, if you want something in life, you're going to work for it. And if you don't want it, you're just going to, pass it to the wayside. And in life, you have to take it by the reins and say that I want to go in this direction. Many people are suffering, not because their life is suffering, it's because they choose it. We have to get out of that mindset, get out of this belief that we can't change our circumstance. Your circumstance is not just where you are, it's where you stay. So if you want to stay there, hey, by all means, I'm not here to pretend you're a horse and bring you to water and force you to drink it. You get to make a choice right now. And, Daniel, like all this information is going to be extremely impactful for many people, changing people's lives. The work that you do, continue on with it because it is going to provide so much more meaning than what we have been made aware of in our schools in our upbringing and even in our adult life. This information is critical. And as we begin to wrap up, I would love to get some more final words from you and then tell the audience where they can find you and stay in touch.
Yeah, I mean, for final words, I would say, humanity is at a precipice. There's this divergent point we're at right now, and there's a lot in front of us. Technology, experimental drugs. The world is shifting in terms of where you're allowed to travel, what you have access to, what you can eat, and evolution's slow. Our biology moves slowly. It doesn't like this massive, rapid access to so many different avenues. And so I would caution people from jumping on the boat or on the bandwagon too many things. You know what? Like you mentioned, P90X and the kind of this and that. Those fads are fine in terms of, they're not going to cause any harm and you can get to know yourself. But we're seeing a generation that is living shorter than their parents. And, the amount of disease, I would say, is record in history on this planet. I don't think we've ever had more health problems than we had today. And in the scientific community, there's a well-known kind of saying that goes something along the lines of, if you want to stay healthy, stay the hell away from the hospitals. And, it's kind of goes to show that it's difficult being a doctor. It's difficult being in that environment where someone can show up from God knows what they put themselves through and in, and you have to follow a protocol in which you're not allowed to do this guess and check like I can. I can sit for hours, with individuals and really take in as much information as if they want to share or what they want to put forward, and then dig through what's accessible and available in terms of, information for them. And it's never been more important to stay healthy, not just for, let's say where you're going to be in couple of years, but if we're not as healthy as a population, not as healthy as a society, we're really subject to be manipulated and used by those that are willing to do the very basics in order to keep their mind sharp, to keep their health intact. And what I've noticed, when someone's health is leaving them, they'll spend any amount of money. They'll do anything to get it back. And it's sort of a tipping point where there's only so much you can do in some scenarios. If you mess up your muscles, no problem. Muscle heals very well in terms of a tissue. It's got tons of stem cells in order to recuperate the muscle. But if you do something that damages your heart's got no stem cells. There's nothing that really turns over and makes a new myocardiocyte. And so this is something to keep in the back of, the mind. And I think the older generations had a very cautious approach to things. And I would bring that caution back. I would bring the curiosity and the caution back, because as cool as it is of all the technologies that we're putting forward, their turnaround rate is massive. And this isn't to say don't engage in things. I don't tell you exactly how to live life, but if you come in looking for my assistance, I'm here to help you navigate in whatever you choose, to know the consequences and to be able to know where your timeline is going. That's the whole point of my company, is called Timeline Sciences. We all share the same timeline. You get to decide where yours goes. And I'm here to help you chart it out so you get the best outcomes. There's a certain biology in which I have spent years of my life creating databases and understanding and trying to find how you can get predictions based off of some very basic things. Even if something doesn't have a very fancy blood test or blood panel, we can still use what's free and available in terms of the physiological data, like the lung function, like resting heart rate, like max heart rate, in order to be able to gauge whether something is going to do well or not. And the way I coach, or the way I suggest, is that, exercise is great, but I don't think very many people can maintain a very high amount of output with exercise throughout their life. Often what happens is they might be great for a few years and then injury happens. What I do recommend is, if we think of a year, I break down years into 4 quarters, is that somewhere within, let's say for the 40-year-old, the 50-year-old, there has to be a point where you put some amount of time, some effort in to build a base if you haven't. And if you've built a base, okay, coming back to that later in life to be able to refine it or maintain it. Within that quarter, how much can you allocate in order to be able to boost yourself up, grow your muscles? An apple tree apples, human being muscles. Everybody loves muscles, men, women. So we're attracted to, right? And it is an important aspect of something that you have control over and something that you can very easily incorporate when it's not this thing in which is hard work. Rather, you enjoy doing it. And that's another part that's key, is finding things that you enjoy to do rather than just, hey, this is what's good for you. And so finding that lifestyle that's gonna be fruitful for years to come is part of my joy, right? I do love sharing that information, aspects of how to be able to minimize what you're eating in order to maximize your health. I think that's it. And so I love cookies. I'm gonna be honest and let people know. And that's sort of my cheat. I find ways to live a healthy life so that I can eat some cookies, right? I know they're not the best for me. I also notice the effects they have on me, but I love dunking some cookies into my coffee, right? I get very simple cookies with not too many ingredients. And that's another aspect in which to navigate today is read food labels. You're not going to get your health is going to be stolen if you don't learn to read food labels. And so if you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me at Timeline Sciences. I'm on X or Twitter. Timeline Sciences again. My name is Daniel. If you message me, I'm more than happy to connect with you and put you on and chart out your way for health and happiness.
Perfect. And I'll make it easy for everyone. Toss those links in the description box so people can just follow you, learn more about what you're doing, stay in tune for all the wonderful things that you have in store for the world. Because as we continue to go, more people are going to become more aligned to looking at their health. Right now, they might not be truly paying attention to their health and their physical fitness, their mind. It might just be something that they're hoping to delegate to someone else, an outside factor, circumstance, whatever it be. But there's going to come a point, and I know it will happen, that people are going to start to pay attention. And when they do, they're going to need coaches like yourself, Daniel, to help them along the way, to assist them, to guide them, to be that beacon of hope, because people are going to lose hope. They're going to say that there's no way out, but there is a way. And I encourage everyone, like I said, check out the links in the description box below and begin that journey now before you hit that trauma, before you hit that wall. Don't wait for something bad to happen. Do it when everything is still good. So I want to thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on, spending some time, and talking about your work. All right, everyone. I'd like to thank you so much for tuning into that episode with Daniel and myself. He was able to give us so much information, a wealth of information. And I mean, like, you have to share this episode with your friends, your family, whoever. This should be a staple in every classroom. And it's not that the podcast itself is meant for the classroom, because sometimes we have people who swear and stuff like that. It's more of an understanding that there's so much more to education than the books you read, than the curriculum, than what your teachers or your parents teach you. There's a vast world beyond our view. And yet many people, they stay exactly where they are. They stay stuck. Maybe you're one of them, and I'm not pointing a finger at you, laughing at you. I'm just trying to help you understand that you don't have to stay there. You know how many people stay in their hometown? Like literally, if you're born in Seattle, you will live your whole life in Seattle. Maybe you go on a cruise and maybe you go on a trip or something, but that's it. But you stay in Seattle your whole life. Not saying that Seattle's not a nice place, but what I am trying to just present is that there is so much more abundance in life and in the world. And if we're not paying attention to it, how do we know we don't have it? Because we can see what we don't have and say, you know what, it would be nice to have it, but then do we have the action to get there? One of my favorite quotes from Kanye West, and I know some people don't like Kanye, and this is not even about liking him or not liking him. He says something so powerful or impactful that money, like just the idea of money, not having money is everything. But if you have it is nothing. Now he says it a little bit more eloquently. He says, having money is not everything. Not having it is. So when you look at it in those regards, that we can look at something and we can say, oh man, it would be nice to have a strong mindset. It would be real nice to have a good life. It would be real nice to have someone who loved me or someone who would cherish me. And I mean, you can go down the road of all the things that you want and all the things that you would like, and for all the concepts and the beliefs that you would like to have instilled in other people. But the reality is, many of the things that you have been told have been a lie. You have been told that you can just go out and live your life in a YOLO type mindset and there's no repercussions. There's a correlation to what's happening in our society, and it's happening so smoothly that we don't even see this is happening unless we pay attention. because the cycle is supposed to be that if we are in a bad place, then we should be in a better place, or the next generation should be in a better place. However, the cycle does not do that. The cycle is, I'm in a good place, now they're going to be in a bad place. How can we change it? And it is an education. It is an understanding. It is a belief. It is a mindset. And one of the things that I think about, and I can see this firsthand with my family, is how my great-grandmother, we went on trips and she was walking around. She was doing everything, and she didn't get Alzheimer's until she was like late 80s, 90s. It wasn't even that bad. But then, toward the end, it got pretty bad, like the last couple of 4 years or something like that. The reality is, her mom lived to like 103. My great-grandmother lived to 99. And we can look at her daughter, my grandmother. She already has Alzheimer's. She is nowhere even close to that 99 mark. Now, we can, of course, have that aspect of prayer, have that aspect of going to live a long and healthy life. But the reality is the onset of Alzheimer's kicked in a lot sooner for her than it did for her mother. This is not to say that, Alzheimer's is just one of those random diseases like cancer. This is something that has some level of prediction. What happened is when she retired and she didn't have any more, I guess you can say, obligations or responsibilities, that's when she started to deteriorate a lot sooner, a lot quicker. But then for my great-grandmother, we can give her the aspect of she had a responsibility, a role to raise us, my brother, my sister, and myself. This was something that was thrown onto her. After school, we were dropped off at her house. It was her responsibility to make sure that we were fed, that we were clean, and that we were safe. I'm sure she didn't sign up for it, but it gave her many, many wonderful years. It gave her more years. And then we can look at what's happening in the generations to come. Many people are holding off on having grandkids until a later date now, right? Or having their kids until a later date. So then that means their grandparents are not getting grandkids until a later date. And you know what's happening by that time? Osteoporosis is starting to kick in, maybe Alzheimer's, all of these different things are happening. And then it's that realization of, oh my God, I have a grandkid now, I need to take care of them. Sometimes you can reverse some of the things that have been going on and going wrong, but sometimes it can be a bit too late for you to make 100% recovery. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take action. My father is a great example. He was going down the wrong path and he said, you know what? I'm going to make some adjustments. And he might not be exactly where he was, but he is damn near better than what he would have been if he kept going down that path, or he gave himself a mindset of a pity party. You get to make some adjustments. What you give yourself has to be a determination. You have to have a strong will and you have to have a strong mind and you have to keep it sharp. Think of it as if you're in a survival situation, let's say you're on Survivor and you go into the desert, right? The last thing you want is to have a machete that is super dull that can't even cut down a little bush or something like that. I'm not saying that you need a machete in order to survive, but it's the aspect of our tools for the toolbox. Our mind needs to stay consistently sharp. And the moment you relinquish it, that's why I don't want to retire. If you see me retiring, you better tell me, you better get off retirement. You better get back to work. And I'll say, yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I will. Because I understand something very clearly, that if I stop, it is much more difficult to get back going. So I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to do something and take a break. And even if I want to have the aspect of easy, I understand I could take a rest, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop, because I'm going to keep on pushing until I'm pushing to the ground. This is a mindset. Not everyone has this type of ideology for themselves. Some people, they want this happy, grandiose life. There's nothing wrong with wanting the good things in life. But if you are forcing yourself to do a plan that was never yours, you're going to find yourself on the other end betrayed and unhappy. And right now you have an opportunity to pay attention, to reconvene, to see if, the path that you're on is the path that you want to stay on. And if it's not, again, check out the links in the description box below. Reach out to Daniel or myself. We would be more than happy to help you on that journey because we understand something about life. And that is we are in control of ourself, our body, our mind to a degree that can give us many more years than if we just kind of followed every single day, and every single day was just another day, and every single week was just another week and month and year. We have to continually make progress. So if you're ready to make some progress, if you're ready to get back on the horse per se, if you're ready to understand your capabilities maybe again or for the first time, we are here to support you along that way because the journey that you're going to be going on is going to lead to your best physical, best mental, and your overall total body and mind state that you're going to say, what have I been doing? Why have I been waiting for so long? It's just that you have not been told it yet. But this is me telling you that it's there, ready for the taking. It is there, ready for you to accept it. It is there for you to live it and embrace it once again. My name is Michael Rearden. I'm a mindset coach. If you have any questions, email me coachinginsession@gmail.com. And I'll see everyone on the next episode of Coaching in Session. Until then, everyone take care.